Hey there, it's Dan from Ready Edge Go. Today we're going to go over how to get your teacher to write an amazing letter of recommendation. So, really simply put, here on a Google Doc, and this is basically what I call the follow-up email. So I'm going to assume that you have already asked your teacher for permission and your teacher has agreed. So what do you do now? Well, turns out a lot of teachers now request forms with a whole bunch of questions on there. Basically a questionnaire that requests information about you, because it turns out most teachers don't really know you that well. So they rely on these little forms. Now the problem with these forms is that they have typically a ton of different questions asking about what personality traits you have, what are some things you do inside and outside the classroom, and regardless of whether or not your teacher has requested such form, there's a really easy way to get your teacher to write exactly what you want them to. And so again, the biggest mistake a lot of people make is they end up asking teachers that they feel like might pertain to the major area of interest that they're applying for, and then they get these generic letters of recommendation that they actually never get to see. So here's a really easy way to get some more control over what your teacher writes and how they write it. So if you look at what I have here, it's actually just a simple follow-up email template you can send to your teacher once they've basically verbally or verbally approved or agreed to write you a letter. And so something so simple as to just thank them for their time. But if you see here, there are 3 talking points I basically highly recommend each student follow up with. Number 1 is the area of academic performance and classroom behavior. What does that mean? Well, you want your teacher to point out, obviously, that you did well in the class. But also, in addition to that, you want them to point out how you behaved in the classroom. And so things like, for instance, did you participate in the class? Were you curious? Did you go further than what was assigned in the problem sets? All these pieces of information will prove vital for a reader who's trying to determine what kind of student you are. In addition to that, obviously, if you were a very helpful classmate, that's also important information for them to know. Understand that each of these bullet points and blurbs you should type out to your teacher in great detail, right? Remember, your teacher probably has anywhere between 30 to 120 other students to probably tend to, and they probably don't know all the details. So help them out. Write out as much as you can. I typically recommend something in the sort of this distance. So if I were to show you kind of how much to put, probably in that range. So basically a paragraph blurb that extends about 5 rows of content should be enough. So going back, that's pretty much the first standard piece of content you want to give a teacher to write about. The second one is optional, but it's incredibly powerful if you have one. And it's basically any kind of interesting stories that reveals something about your character. Right? Not every student has this, but it's super meaningful when you can basically provide a teacher, whether they know it or they don't, a story that happened in the classroom that bodes really, really well for you, and shows you in a specific light. Obviously, it's much more meaningful for someone to read a story about you as opposed to your teacher just saying, "Oh, Jill is really, courageous or really curious," right? Stories tend to stick. Lastly is basically anything outside the classroom that basically one of your teachers is likely to know about. So for instance, if you're having your engineering teacher write your letter of recommendation, and maybe you're also part of robotics, right? That's something that your engineering teacher might know of, but may not know a huge amount or a great detail on. So do them a favor and basically write a short blurb worth of about 75 to 100 words about your involvement in robotics and ultimately what that portrays about you. So something outside the classroom that provides additional information to what you've already provided. So that's pretty much it. If you kind of review, the first point is inside the classroom, so is the second point, and the third one is outside the classroom. Obviously, by the way, if you're requesting this from numerous teachers, make sure that the first bullet point is rather consistent. You should be perceived as someone who is performing well and is a curious and helpful student in the class. But as for the other 2, make sure you vary them, right? Show different character traits, in each of your letters of recommendation. So that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below or just contact me directly. See you guys later.